And starting off at number 10, we have Kommo-o GX. This two-prize Pokemon is widely regarded as one of the weakest Pokemon GX released during the Sun and Moon block, and for good reason. For 1 colorless energy, Adamantite Press deals 30 damage and reduces all damage dealt to this Pokemon during your opponent's next turn by 30. For 1 electric, 1 fighting, and 2 colorless energy, Shred deals 130 damage and ignores all effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. Lastly, for the same attack cost as Shred, Ultra Uppercut GX deals 240 damage, but can only be used once per game due to it being a GX attack. Kommo-o GX is a great example of the problems many Pokemon in this list are going to have. Its attacks are too low impact to make up for their restrictive dual-type energy costs, and they're outclassed by other cards as a result. The attacks are also bad on a Stage 2 Pokemon, and could have easily been a Basics attacks. The idea behind Adamantite Press is that the damage reduction it provides to Kommo-o will keep the Pokemon healthy until you have enough energy attached to use Shred or Ultra Uppercut GX, but this causes the Pokemon to have pitifully low damage output until you attach 4 energy cards to it. Even when fully powered up, the damage output doesn't improve. Shred can 2-hit KO most Pokemon from the time, but why use a Stage 2 Pokemon that needs 4 energy attached when other, better cards are equally capable of doing so? While Ultra Uppercut GX can 1-hit KO Pokemon like Decidueye GX and any Pokemon EX, it comes up short against bulky Stage 2 GX Pokemon like Metagross and Solgaleo. Not to mention the attack can only be used once per game. The one upside to this card is that Double Dragon Energy, a card that provides 2 energy of any type to a Dragon Pokemon it's attached to, existed alongside it for the first year in Standard. This theoretically allowed players to use Shred and Ultra Uppercut for only 2 energy attachments, with both a Double Dragon Energy and a Double Colorless Energy. But this didn't fix the problem of low damage output. Adding insult to injury, Kommo-o GX wasn't even the best user of Double Dragon Energy during this brief window, since Noivern GX could use Distort to item lock opponents. Once Double Dragon Energy left the Standard format, there was no hope for Kommo-o GX to see any relevant play due to its restrictive attack costs and pitiful low damage output. And at number 9, we have the last two-prize Pokemon on this list with Kingdra EX. For 1 colorless energy, Big Storm deals 20 damage and discards a Stadium card in play. For 1 water and 3 colorless energy, Dragon Trail deals 60 damage, plus 30 more for each electric energy attached to this Pokemon. Dragon Tail encourages players to stack as much electric energy onto this Pokemon as possible for limitless damage output. Pokemon with this style of attack have existed in all eras of the TCG, and are limited in their competitive viability by a few factors. Firstly, how easy is it to get the requisite energy onto the Pokemon? For Kingdra EX's time in the Standard format, the answer was pretty difficult. Outside of Double Dragon Energy, the best energy acceleration cards in the format were Bronzong, Mega Manectric, and Max Elixir. Bronzong only attached Metal Energy. Mega Manectric only attached 2 energy at a time, meaning you had to attack twice with Turbo Bolt before having a chance to use Kingdra EX, and Max Elixir was an item card that was limited to 4 uses per game, and could miss energy cards with its effect. The second aspect which determines whether an energy stacking Pokemon sees competitive play is how easily it can hit important damage thresholds. At the time, 180 and 220 were the most important HP numbers, since a majority of Pokemon EX and Mega Pokemon EX had 180 and 222 HP or less respectively. Kingdra EX requires 4 attached electric energy to 1-hit KO basic Pokemon EX, and 6 electric energy to 1-hit KO Mega Pokemon. This Pokemon requires far too much energy to take 1-hit KOs against commonly played Pokemon. Even when not playing against lower HP single Pokemon, you'd still need 4 energy on Kingdra EX to take 80 KOs, since Dragon Tail's base attack cost was just so high. This Pokemon's attacks were too costly to be worthwhile. Even in the expanded format where good electric energy acceleration did exist, this Pokemon saw no competitive use due to its shortcomings with players instead of opting for the lower cost, more reliable Raikou. Being a Pokemon EX outclassed by a single prize Pokemon is more than enough to earn a spot on this list. And at number 8, we have Flapple, a Pokemon that requires setup to leverage its power. For 1 fire energy, Flight Up lets you attach up to 3 basic energy cards from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. Also, for 1 grass and 1 fire energy, Corrosive Acid deals 70 damage and burns your opponent's active Pokemon. Since burn doesn't often appear on cards we cover, here's a short explanation of the status condition. In between turns, a player puts 2 damage counters on their burn Pokemon and flips a coin. If heads, the status condition is removed. If tails, the Pokemon remains burn. The main draw of Flapple is definitely Flight Up, since attaching 3 energy with a single attack is very powerful, and cards which do so have been competitively viable before. The problem when you compare Flapple to other setup cards is the fact that the Pokemon isn't a basic. Generally speaking, if you're playing a Pokemon for utility attack, you intend to use that card on your first turn before establishing your deck's main attacker or game plan. If you went first and had an Applet in play, you could evolve into Flapple and then have Flight Up available by the time you're allowed to attack. The problem comes when you're going second. On the first turn going second, you can't access Flapple due to it being a Stage 1 evolution Pokemon. In a very slow standard environment, getting a utility Stage 1 attack off on your second turn going second is doable, but the format this card existed in was anything but slow. For all this Pokemon's time in Standard, it existed alongside powerful Pokemon VMAX and V-Stars. Decks built around low investment attackers such as Urshifu VMAX, Mew VMAX, or Palkia V-Star put far too much offensive pressure on any deck for players to consider a Stage 1 Pokemon that exists only to accelerate energy. These cards also either set themselves up or had better ways to set up, meaning players never had a serious reason to consider playing a card like Flapple in their decks. Not helping Flapple's case is where the accelerated energy comes from. Unlike comparable utility attackers that can accelerate from the deck, Flight Up attaches energy cards from the discard pile. This means that in order to leverage the full power of the attack, players not only have to evolve into a Stage 1 Pokemon, but also discard 3 energy cards while doing so. The unreliability of Flapple's setup combined with how little strategies of its time needed this effect easily earned it a spot on this list. And at number 7, we have Hydreigon. For 1 Psychic and 1 Dark Energy, Dragon Counter deals 20 damage, plus 100 more for each prize card your opponent took during their last turn. Also, for 1 Psychic, 1 Dark, and 2 Colorless Energy, Pitch Black Fang deals 210 damage. Hydreigon offers up a unique spin on their revenge style attacks, which deal more damage the turn after an opponent knocked out one of your Pokemon. Instead of increasing the damage of the attack by a flat amount, Dragon Counter's damage gets boosted depending on the value of the KO'd Pokemon. In theory, this allows the attack to reach absurd numbers for a very low cost, especially when considering the fact that Hydreigon is a single prize Pokemon. If an opponent KO'd a Pokemon VMAX worth 3 prize cards, Dragon Counter dealt 320 damage, enough to one-hit KO many Pokemon VMAX. If playing against an opponent's VMAX deck, being able to take a KO with a single prize Pokemon could massively skew the race to taking 6 prize cards in your favor. So then why is this Pokemon on a list of the worst Dragon types in the TCG? The main problem with the card, once again, comes from its reliability and the setup required for a Hydreigon to be truly effective. By requiring 2 specific types of energy, Dragon Counter's attack cost limits how many decks can play Hydreigon alongside it. These limited options are narrowed down even further by Dragon Counter's effect. Unless the Pokemon being knocked out is a 2 or 3 prize Pokemon, the attack does actually very little damage in other attacks with a more standard revenge text. Take Hydreigon and its revenge attack as an example. If any Pokemon was knocked out during your last turn, this attack does 160 total damage for the same total amount of energy as Dragon Counter. If the Pokemon that got knocked out was a single prize Pokemon, Hydreigon actually outdamages Hydreigon without requiring a Stage 2 Pokemon setup. This pushes Hydreigon towards being used in decks with 2 or 3 prize attackers. Practically though, you'd really need to use this Pokemon in a deck with VMAX cards, since dealing 220 damage with Dragon Counter falls short of knocking out any Pokemon V-Star or VMAX. Unfortunately for Hydreigon, VMAX Pokemon were far too effective to consider playing an additional Stage 2 attacker alongside them. And at number 6, we have another Stage 2 Pokemon in Dragonite. For 1 Electric Energy, Wrapped in Wind lets you attach up to 2 basic energy from your hand to itself. Also for 3 Grass, 1 Electric, and 1 Colorless Energy, Heavy Impact deals 150 damage. This Pokemon also has an Ancient trait, a mechanic present in the latter half of X and Y block. Ancient traits were not abilities and could not be removed or prevented. This card had the Delta Plus trait, which caused you to take an extra prize card whenever Dragonite knocked out an opponent's Pokemon. Delta Plus is by far the strongest Ancient trait, and was only balanced by being present on a terrible Pokemon. This trait is so strong that Articuno, a Pokemon almost entirely reliant on coin flips for its damage output, was a common inclusion in any deck that could accelerate water energy to it. Dragonite unfortunately falls into the category of Delta Plus Pokemon that are terrible. A Stage 2 Pokemon with an attack costing 5 energy to use requires an unbelievable level of setup to get any advantage out of it. The card designers responsible for balancing this card understood this, and so provided Dragonite with its own means of energy acceleration through Wrapped in Wind. But this attack doesn't fix the problem. Firstly, a single use of Wrapped in Wind doesn't fully power up Heavy Impact, as you'll only have a total of 3 energy after using it. You have to take at least 3 turns in order to power up Heavy Impact, since your best means of energy acceleration still leaves Dragonite with 2 missing energy. Matters aren't made easier by the fact that Wrapped in Wind attaches energy cards from your hand, so you'd still have to draw 5 energy over the course of the game to start dealing damage with Heavy Impact. If you ever got a fully powered Dragonite online and attacking, it could put in a lot of work. 150 damage is nothing to scoff at, especially when any KOs you take give it an extra prize card. The problem is getting there. Something so unreasonable that this Pokemon is easily one of the worst dragon Pokemon in the TCG. And at number 5, we have Cyclizar, the most recently released Pokemon on this list. For 1 grass, 1 dark, and 1 colorless energy, this Pokemon's Acceleration Drive attack deals 100 damage. Then you flip a coin. If heads, prevent all damage dealt to this Pokemon by your opponent's attacks during their next turn, and prevent all effects of attacks done to Cyclizar. Pokemon with only a single attack tend to be very hit or miss in the TCG due to being inflexible. A Pokemon's competitive viability lives and dies based on how effective its attacks or abilities are at fulfilling specific roles in a deck. So, when a card only has 1 effect, that effect must be powerful enough to make up for lacking any other attacks or abilities. Cyclizar is a good example of a card which spectacularly fails in this regard. Acceleration Drive combines the usual dragon-type issue of clunky attack costs with a coin flip reliant effect to create an attack that is difficult to use and is only good half the time when it is used. Effect and damage prevention are very strong. But since Acceleration Drive only provides the 2 when you win a coin toss, the 3 energy you attach to Cyclizar will frequently deal only 100 damage with no effect. This card requires too much energy to do too little. And although its potential damage prevention is certainly a strong effect, its unreliability earns it a spot on this list. And at number 4, we have another coin-reliant Pokemon with White Kyurem. For 1 fire and 1 colorless energy, Damage Rush makes you flip a coin until you get tails, and does 20 damage for each heads. Also for 1 fire, 1 water, and 2 colorless energy, Cold Fire deals 80 damage plus 40 more if you win a coin flip. White Kyurem has very similar problems to the previously mentioned Cyclizar, in that both its attacks are highly reliant on luck to be effective. Damage Rush is by far the best example of this. Although having 2 different attacks, one with a very reasonable 2 energy cost, makes out White Kyurem to be more versatile and flexible, Damage Rush is so heavily reliant on coin tosses that the attack might as well not be printed on the card. The theoretical infinite damage output the attack has may be appealing to new players, or players with loaded dice, but practically, this attack will do nothing half the time you use it. If the first coin you flip for the attack comes up tails, you just spent 2 turns attaching energy to a card, which quite literally did nothing. If you want White Kyurem to deal 40 damage for 2 energy, a rate which is decent but not good, Damage Rush will only do that 1 in every 4 times you use the attack. If you were using White Kyurem, you were doing so for its Cold Fire attack. At the time, dealing 120 damage for 4 energy with a single price basic Pokemon was actually quite good. The 4 energy attack cost was still a huge downside, but was mitigatable by pairing this Pokemon alongside Blastoise and his Deluge ability, which allows you to attach as many basic water energy from your hand to your Pokemon as you like during your turn. If Cold Fire always dealt 120 damage, it may have seen competitive play. However, it doesn't always deal 120 damage, and missing out on 40 damage by flipping tails instead of heads made a significant difference when considering how this card interacted with the metagame. Generally speaking, if you play a single prize Pokemon, you want it to trade positively into your opponent's 2 prize Pokemon, by either taking a 1-hit or 2-hit knockout, because if you and your opponent were trading 2-hit KOs, the person using single prize Pokemon would always be ahead. Even using a single prize Pokemon to finish off a damage 2 prizer could swing the race to a 6 prize cards in your favor. If you got unlucky using Cold Fire and flipped 2 tails with the attack in a row, it would deal 160 damage total, an amount which just fell short of knocking out nearly all competitively viable Pokemon EX, which existed alongside White Kyurem. Whiffing a single knockout over the course of a game could potentially turn that game from a winning to a losing position, and so White Kyurem was outclassed by Black Kyurem, a Pokemon which dealt a reliable 100 damage, as a single prize attacker in Blastoise decks for its entire lifetime. It's also worth noting that many Blastoise players didn't feel a need to play a single prize attacker thanks to Black Kyurem EX being a one-shot machine. Not only was White Kyurem outclassed in its niche entirely, but that niche barely existed in the first place. And at number 3, we have Haxorus, a card which has the biggest weakness any card can have, being extremely boring on top of being terrible. For 1 colorless energy, Slash deals 60 damage. Also for 1 fighting and 1 metal energy, Wild Axe deals 160 damage plus 30 to itself. Make no mistake, this card is pack filler meant to pad out a set size, but that doesn't mean there was nothing interesting going on with it. Its basic stage, Axu, could actually cheat out with its Ultra Evolution attack. For 1 colorless energy, you could evolve it into Haxorus from your deck if you want a coin toss. This attack, requiring a coin flip, clearly establishes that nobody designed this evolution line wanting it to be playable even at a rogue level. Evolving into a stage 2 with an attack was far too slow during the late Sword and Shield era this card was released during, especially since Haxorus gets 1 hit knocked out by Arceus V-Star, one of the most commonly played cards during this era of the TCG. Haxorus does have 1 positive merit, that being Wild Axe's ability to 2-hit KO every V-Star Pokemon. But many other Stage 2 Pokemon could also do this. And in fact, Wild Axe is also what sets Haxorus apart from other fringe Stage 2 Pokemon in a bad way. That 30 recoil damage functionally reducing its HP from 170 to 140 made it significantly easier for players to trade prize cards with it by using their own single prize attackers such as Shady Dealings and Inteleon, backed up by Quick Shooting Inteleon or Galarian Moltres. These 2 cards specifically saw a lot of competitive play in both their own single prize attacking strategy and in V-Star decks like Arceus or Palkia, and their existence to shut out many other single prize attackers. Adding insult to injury, Garchomp was released in the exact same set as it. This Pokemon's attack dealt equal damage to Wild Axe, cost the same total energy, and had an ability which prevented all damage dealt to it for a single turn. All things considered, it was superior to Haxorus in every way. Garchomp saw no serious tournament usage. If a better version of itself didn't make the cut, it should be clear why Haxorus has earned the number 3 spot on this list. And at number 2, we have Latios. This Pokemon breaks the dragon type trend of having attack costs that require multiple types of basic energy or high attack costs, but falls short on every other metric that makes a card good. For 1 water energy, Skyblade deals 20 damage plus 20 more if Latias is on your bench. Also, for 1 psychic and 2 colorless energy, Speedwing deals 60 damage. All Latios has going for it compared to other dragon type Pokemon is a reasonable attack cost. Both Skyblade and Speedwing are reliable attacks with consistent damage output that can be used for little investment, but that doesn't automatically make a Pokemon good. The reason this Pokemon is one of the worst dragon type cards in the TCG is because the attacks are just too weak and honestly, pretty boring. Skywing, requiring you to have a specific Pokemon on your bench in order to double its damage, may seem like an interesting build around for a strategy, but the only Latios legal alongside this Latios didn't do anything special, and arguably could have been on this list. Even if you go set up this admittedly very easy to get combination, 40 damage for 2 energy wasn't particularly great, and definitely wasn't enough to encourage players to play and bench a useless Latios. Speedwing doesn't do much better either. 3 energy, even when using double colorless energy to power the attack faster, was still too much to deal just 60 damage. If you wanted to use double colorless energy to set up a single prize Pokemon that attacks for 3 energy, the far superior Bouffalant could deal 120 damage to Pokemon EX while reducing all damage it takes by 20. Latios did have one advantage over Bouffalant, that being that it could leverage Alteria's Flight Song to boost its damage by 20, but there were better dragons like Garchomp to pair with the damage boost. All in all, Latios is a bad card with almost no redeeming attributes, but it's not the worst dragon type ever. And lastly, rounding things out at number 1, we have Dragonite. This stage 2 Pokemon has 2 coin flip reliant attacks. For 1 electric and 2 colorless energy, Hyper Beam deals 50 damage and discards an energy beam from your opponent's active Pokemon if you win a coin flip. Also, for 1 grass and 3 colorless energy, Hurricane Tail makes you flip 4 coins and deals 60 damage for each heads. This Pokemon combines many of the issues present in dragon type cards covered throughout this list. Firstly, it's a stage 2 with a high attack cost, meaning it takes a lot of setup to even start doing anything. Secondly, its attacks are underwhelming for such a hefty investment. This card was released at a time when using low cost efficient attacks or energy acceleration were at the top of the metagame. Hyper Beam discarded an energy card didn't matter against decks using Dark Patch, Colress's Machine, Blastoise, or Victini EX with a Victory Piece, which didn't care about losing 1 energy a turn because they could easily just reattach it. Hurricane Tail's maximum damage output of 240 with 4 heads, or 180 with 3 heads, may be appealing when no Pokemon in the game could survive it, but you'd be disappointed when you miss a few coin flips and only deal 120 damage, or 60 damage, something that would happen over 2/3 of the time you use the attack. Piling on to the negative aspects for this specific Dragonite, a far superior Dragonite card with an effect to item lock your opponent was printed only a few sets after this one. This item locking Dragonite actually saw competitive success at the regional level and was a respected strategy. For being a stage 2 Pokemon that requires an evolutionary line, lots of energy, and coin flips to constantly go in your favor, Dragonite is easily the worst Dragon-type Pokemon in the TCG. And that's it for the video. There's a lot of bad Dragon-type cards out there. So if your favorite bad card didn't make this list, let us know down in the comments below.